So I want to remind everybody that there is a Q&A pod at the bottom. We're hoping to capture questions from our attendees here today. So I got a couple questions here, guys, already from our attendees. So one of the questions is from a current Office 365 user is, what are some of the new features that are coming out to Office 365 for security and compliance? Bob, Jeff?
Sure. So there's a lot of really great new features that were announced at Ignite really just a couple of weeks ago for Microsoft for coming for 365. They're adding a lot of great new features and functionality that really haven't been there before that really help a lot in terms of security and compliance across the board. For example, they've got a lot of enhanced new anti-phishing capabilities. They've really improved the machine learning based phishing technology they have on the back end. So when you have safe links enabled, for example, it now has the ability to a heightened level of protecting users from themselves, from clicking links they shouldn't be clicking on, for example. And they've actually, speaking of safe links, traditionally you see a big long string of garbled URL that really don't understand other than it says safe links. And organizations have trained their users to say, hey, hover over a link, make sure it goes where it says it's going to go, and read the link to make sure it's not kind of a strange thing that doesn't match where it says it's going to go. And they're removing the big long thread that they've traditionally had in the past for safe links and displaying the actual link to the URL itself. So that's a great improvement just from a usability, customer-facing perspective. They're also adding a new feature where basically traditionally safe links has been a slow process, the safe attachments, where basically when you look at safe attachments, traditionally, when they're delivered, there's always a delay. You've got to wait for a while, and then they finally appear in your Outlook client. Going forward, they'll allow you to basically have an option to turn on for near real-time attachments, where you'll receive the attachment, you'll actually open it up, be able to review it, and even edit it if it's like a Word document, for example, while it's still being scanned on the back end to keep the user protected. There's a new threat intelligence capability in Office 365 where they're actually going to have an attack simulator. We actually can simulate doing phishing attacks against your users, which is a really neat thing that is going to be a powerful tool for organizations to see what's going well, what's not going well, and having a report afterwards to see how it turned out. There's also going to be a threat tracker capability, which basically allows you to see different categories of threat campaigns that are out in the wild right now. You can even have a threat explorer capability where you can see which sensitive content is being shared externally with your organization. So that's a great new feature as well. So there's really just a lot of great new things that are coming into play, such as a compliance manager for having all of your compliance in one place, which is going to be really important for our federal customers. When you look at ISO certifications or FedRAMP or some of the other government-based standards, you can actually have those integrated into Compliance Manager and see which of the compliance capabilities from a controls perspective Microsoft has implemented for you automatically from a baseline perspective, and then what controls you can implement yourself on top of that. So really, Microsoft's really gone a long way in terms of really helping their customers from both a security and compliance perspective across the board.
Yeah, I just have a couple of other things too, like flipping the script a little bit. I think there's also been vast improvements in the administration of some of these security controls. To me, dragging back to my world where, we have to say, look, here's how you're going to enable these things and recommendations that we make to you. Just take OneDrive, for instance, everything once upon a time, not that long ago, really had to be delivered through series of PowerShell scripts, et cetera. And while, there's nothing wrong with PowerShell scripts and they're fantastic at automating tasks, right? Driving what I would say core functionality back to, the traditional admin consoles and tabs out in Office 365, has really allowed some of the smaller and mid-sized organizations where they don't have PowerShell scripting experts, and oftentimes they use the UI to do user administration, has really dramatically improved across a number of the products as well.
Terrific, guys. So here's a funny one, Jeff. You must have a friend in the attendee list here. So they say this is going to be a softball for you, but they're interested in learning more about identity-centric security, and what does that mean, and what does that mean from a Microsoft perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I could see the attendee list, and I could definitely see where it may have come from. As far as identity, centric security, really that's the new mantra. Identity is the new perimeter, essentially, in the world of security these days. Where, as we discussed earlier in the session, traditionally, the old firewall model of hard outer shell and kind of soft in the center doesn't really, doesn't work anymore. People have gone mobile. They're on mobile devices across tablets and mobile phones and laptops. And really, you need to track what's happening with the users themselves, as well as from a role-based perspective, from policies, from access control, from authentication, what's happening across the board, across your users, as well as the information they have access to. So if you can secure things to the users themselves, as well as through the ability to have all the policies and access controls and whatnot with a full integrated manner where you have a single identity per person, no headless accounts, for example, that really helps limit the threats that are now attacking your organizations across the board, where, threats are getting, attacks are increasing dramatically every single year, with a 30% rise just from last year alone occurring. And when you even look at, identity of things, or excuse me, Internet of Things, IoT, devices are becoming identities as well these days. So that's something else to consider for organizations, where you've got to manage the identity of a device to make sure it is what it says it is. So you don't get rid of some of the man-in-the-middle type attacks where people can basically pretend they have your cell phone, hijack your text message that you just got for your authentication, and log in as you. You've got to be able to make sure that you're protected from these kind of things these days.
So here's a question. I know we're really talking about technical implementation and best practices, but I actually know that this is flat out a question that so many of our customers, even licensed customers, have today. They're trying to understand, what is this new M365 SKU that Microsoft's talking about, from a security perspective, what's included in M365 E3, E5. So, Bob, Jeff, anybody want to kind of jump in on that and help our attendees understand the differences here?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it to start with. I think that, so there's all these packages and programs, et cetera. Going back to the alphabet soup comment we've been, using a couple of times here or there. It could definitely get confusing. And by the way, I did a whole 35 or 40-minute webcast on just this topic. So I don't think we have 40 minutes to answer. But, simply put, right, there's a couple of pieces that make this up, right? So for most of our customers, they're either E3, E5, or G3, G5, depending on which way you want to call it. But, and so you get a series of capabilities in EG3, right? So, that include basic DLP stuff, all of those kinds of things that I think most of our customers are pretty understanding of what those baseline capabilities are. Then if we step up from a security, there's a lot of other features, but we'll talk about security here. From a security perspective, right, if we step up to level 5, right, E5, then we get, customer lockbox and as well as ATP, right, which is something that I think Jeff's talked about quite a bit today. And that's sort of your baseline Office 365 level stuff. Then we start saying, okay, well, I want to add, we've heard it brought up a couple of times, EMS or EM plus S, enterprise mobility plus security. And so when we take those and bolt that on to either one of these, either E3 or E5, right, we get this magical mystical beast that's being thrown around now called M365 E3 or M365 E5, right? So that's the combination of your base Office 365 plan plus EM plus S together, and a couple of other things like Windows 10 thrown in, and you get sort of the entire platform end to end, bundled together to say basically at, Office 365 Plan 3 plus all the additional capabilities. And oh, by the way, when we're talking about EM plus S, those, the types of things we've rattled off for things like conditional access, deeper mobile device management, the ability to do Azure information protection and some of those things. We also referred to it as RMS earlier as well. So those capabilities come with that level. We bundle those together, my Office 365 plan plus EM plus S, add in Windows 10 licensing, and we get this sort of end-to-end capability of cloud functionality called M365. And, so if our base plan is E3, it's M365 E3. If our base plan is E5, it's M365 E5. Hopefully I didn't confuse people more.
Anything, Jeff, or you, Bob, covered pretty well there, I think.
No, I think Bob covered it pretty well. One additional note, one thing they just announced recently is that they're actually expanding ATP's coverage. Traditionally, it's been email focused. So they're actually adding the safe attachments and safe links capabilities to both SharePoint Online as well as OneDrive. So that's going to be a great capability to have that across the board for a more well-rounded protection of your information, of course, your mission of your organization.
Well, again, we want to encourage everybody to put their questions in the Q&A pod down the bottom. I see we have one more question. Bob, you did answer it in text, but we'll answer it here as well live. What type of out-of-the-box visibility into all of the security controls is available, and can it integrate with third-party security and event management?
So I can start with sort of, what I put in the text answer, and Jeff, you can hop on with any further details if you want. So this is a question that comes up quite a bit, especially in sort of mature enterprise organizations. They have an infrastructure already that is, sort of aggregating logs from another number of services. This particularly rears its head in sort of departments of revenue, things that have IRS 1075 requirements, et cetera, where, I have to show all these audit logs. Well, Office 365, a lot of that information is exposed via PowerShell from Office 365. So I can actually I can run those PowerShell scripts, dump the details of those audit reports out and import them into these third-party security event information management systems, right? Like Splunk and others, right? So those do exist. And then, if they have automations, which means, notifying people, et cetera, if certain criteria are met, all that stuff can still be, executed based on the content of these additional logs being brought in.
Yeah, and just to build upon what Bob just said, when you look at Compliance Manager, that's where you can truly see the true controls that are implemented in place in your specific organization and your tenant to understand from a specific framework perspective what you have in place, what's covered by Microsoft, kind of underneath the hood, and then what you can do and configure on your own side from a controls perspective. And that really gives you a lot of flexibility to review the frameworks you have available, native out of the box from Microsoft, see ones that are directly applicable to you, add those to your dashboard and Compliance Manager, see what action items exist in terms of things you need to address, as well as you can check your service compliance in general across the board in regards to the specific controls that apply to your organization, whether defense-based or federal-based, and then you can also one other tool that's very helpful is Secure Score. It allows you to see what kind of controls that you can configure to help increase the overall security stance of your tenant. And it gives you a numerical score that shows you which items you can implement for a low cost of implementation from how much level of effort it takes, as well as understand what the level of impact is to your users. And each one, as you implement it, increases your score, so you can see over time how you've been able to increase the overall security of your tenant in Office 365. It's a very powerful tool overall that I've really enjoyed that Microsoft has implemented recently.
And Jeff, how is that available, Secure Score?
So that is directly available in Office 365. So if you go to the Security Compliance section, you can actually look at Secure Score and see how well you're doing. One note, it is not a live update. It updates nightly. So as you make changes, don't expect that score to jump up and down. But actually, the next day you go back in and you'll see the change that you've implemented and see how you've positively impacted your organization's security.
So I'm not sure if we have any other questions. Great session, great questions. Appreciate the questions from our attendees as well. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. Our next session begins at 3 o'clock. That session is Teams, Groups, and Sites. Oh my, choosing the best tools for collaboration. That's another session that's hosted by Jen Mason. I want to thank our panelists. You can see everybody's contact information here, in particular Jeff and Bob's. Feel free to reach out to them. They look forward to getting your further follow-up on questions. We look forward to your feedback. Again, everybody, next session begins at 3 o'clock. Teams, Groups, and Sites, oh my, choosing the best tools for collaboration. Bob, Jeff, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks.